this is going to sound a little far back and nostalgic, but do you remember the days when Steve Jobs and even Phil Schiller at times would go up on stage at a keynote, talk about the Mac, and to prove the Mac's performance, would show a competitor's laptop or product and show how inferior that product was to the Mac that they were showing off. If you remember those times, this present era under Tim Cook is probably one of the most disappointing eras of the Mac line. It is a very disappointing era because of the fact that there is no care toward the Mac. We got an update in October, and that's a great update. It's like a nice fresh breath. It's like resuscitating someone that's been sitting there next to the pool, finally resuscitating them after all that time, finally. There was no mention of the iMac. No design change to the iMac. There was no update to the Mac Mini. There was no update to the Mac Pro. There was no update to the iPad or the iPad Pro or the iPad Mini or the iPod Touch. Or obviously the iPad and the iPods are now legacy. They don't care about those. But particularly when it gets to the point that even the Mac line is now at the point that they don't update them annually. When it gets to the point that Apple is treating the Mac line like the iPod and only considering updating it on off years and not every single year, that's when you know that Tim Cook does not particularly care about the personal and pro consumer space. It was disappointing to see that they went with the touch bar as their main gimmick. They used to come out and say there were 10 things that would make a specific Mac great. And people ate this Mac up. I'm glad that Apple's doing well with their sales. That's cool and all. But people still ate it up. They didn't go over 500 facts. They didn't go over 10 things. They just went over the touch bar. And I didn't find that to be a very viable reason to buy a Mac, especially when you remove all of the USB ports, the SD card slot, and you only have a headphone jack and a, USB-C connector, or 4 of them. Why would you go out? I guess because of the power, right? You get the power, and so you justify the power for all the dongles that you're going to have to spend. You're probably going to have to spend at least $100 more on dongles than you would have to spend on an old MacBook that would have had all of the USB pieces together. Tim Cook is leading the Mac line into a space that is so arrogantly uncaring for anyone that's at an entry level. Anyone that needs the products to have just a USB port. Because, as a college person, I would like to have a USB port so I could stick my thumb drive in and just go from there. But because you wanted USB-C so badly, I now have to work with your USB-C. Do you see the ignorance? Maybe that was just ignored. But I see a company that just does not care as much as it once did. Yes, Steve Jobs, in his era, removed a lot of things. The MacBook Air, for example, removed the CD-ROM in a time when, yes, we were moving away from CD-ROMs, but they were still pretty heavily used in a lot of things. But there was still the Mac Pro with the CD-ROM. There were still many other products that had the CD drives in them. Here, they're going out, here you go. Make sure you have USB-C connectors, guys. That's it. Oh, remember that charging port that we used to have that would work perfectly? Yeah, we're going to remove that. Great piece of technology. We're not even going to talk about the charging port on this one because obviously it's inferior to whatever we had before. I thought it was embarrassing, to be honest, that they're going so far to expand on USB-C that they justify removing the charging port that was so iconic to the Mac line. Even going so far, Tim Cook is obviously making his stain or his display on the Apple world now. He's obviously the guy that wants to keep pushing profits. That's cool. But even in September, we didn't get an iPhone SE update alongside the 7. We still have an iPhone, I think, 6S body or 6S performance in a when it's the 7 now, and we're not going to have it in March. Apparently, we're not even going to get a performance bump in March for the SE. So that's great. So he wants to talk. He wants to go into wearable technology. They want to do eyeglass. They want to do eyeglasses now, and so. But going back to Mac, Microsoft came out, had a Surface Studio product, and I know that the iMac is not the same as the Surface Studio, but they come out, they give us the thing that would surprise us, the surprising thing, the one thing that makes you go, wow. This is how you engineer something. This is how you surprise and enlighten and change technology for the better. Apple goes and doesn't even mention iMac, doesn't mention Mac Mini, doesn't mention Mac Pro. How do you not mention Mac Pro? That is the quintessential. If you're going to have a Mac event and you don't talk about Mac Pro, after everything that's been said about Mac Pro over the past few years, then, I mean, again, I don't understand the point now. Apple's just focused on the iPhone now. That's it. I get that. I guess I get that the PC world is a dying breed, particularly. But if Apple really wanted to step up, and this is why Apple didn't fail with the iPad Pro. Well, Apple failed with the iPad Pro. Apple's iPad Pro was not a problem. It was the fact that Apple didn't do enough with the iPad Pro. What we were expecting was a mix between OS X and iOS. Something that would be, God dang it, something between OS X and iOS. You know, a great mixture that would allow for you to work with all the desktop apps you need and have the performance that you need, because this is Apple we're talking about. This isn't just some bland tablet. This is Apple. But instead they made an iPad with a 12.9-inch screen that we can't do anything with, except for watch videos and maybe a little bit more performance, but not enough to really do what you need. And then Apple goes out and advertises it like it's a full laptop replacement. No, Microsoft did the job for a laptop replacement. Apple has no right, Tim Cook has no right to have their advertising campaign try to even make this thing look like a laptop replacement. That was embarrassing. It's embarrassing that they're still acting as if this is what the world should have as a viable laptop replacement product from Apple. Of course, let's not even mention the $300 booklet that they show off. Whew, wow, stupid. I'm sorry, stupid is the only thing I can say. If you went out and spent $300 on that, or $250 on a book that you can get off of Google Images, you are stupid. I don't care how much of an of an Apple fan you are. That is probably the most idiotic product you could sink your teeth into. You could spend that money on an iPod, an iPad, many other products. A book, though, is embarrassing. But, no, it's pretty disappointing that at this point in time, what we have with the Mac line now is a shell of itself. It's not the same thing. It's just disappointing that Phil Schiller coming up. It does not have the same flair that it once did. When Phil Schiller would come up and unveil something, it would have meaning. Phil Schiller coming up and unveiling this product or a Mac device now is just, it's a cool, legendary thing, but it's no longer that, oh, wow, that Apple flair, because the presentations have changed. It's not as wowing. There's nothing really to buy here because Tim Cook is mainly thinking about the consumer that has no brain, that doesn't know what the difference is between 8 gigs of RAM and 4 gigs of RAM, that doesn't know anything about the computer. And that's pretty, and so they think that they can just get away with that. That they can give you a MacBook. Last year, 2015, you could come up with a MacBook that had an Intel Core M chip. Embarrassing on a MacBook. You're going to call that a MacBook product. So there are many things wrong with what Apple has done and what Tim Cook has done with Apple. But I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about where they go from here. Because if iPhone starts falling, and I don't think it will, but at a certain point, people go start getting exhausted, and more people are going to probably switch over and buy more, and blah, 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 and whatever. People will probably love Apple for as long as possible, even if they do the stupidest thing. Even if they remove the headphone jack, people will still buy their product. But, you know, that's where we are now. Consumer trust is that high. And I mean, Apple's a reliable company with their computers. So I get why people go to Mac. I went to Mac with my Mac Mini because I believed in Apple. I believed in Apple. That's why I bought a Mac Mini. But now I'm thinking about getting a Surface Book i7. I'm thinking about looking at the Surface Studio for a new desktop. I'm looking at many different things, but I'm definitely not looking at Apple the same way that I did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Definitely not. Because what do you think? What are your thoughts? Comment below. Thanks for watching. I'm Brian Swan, and stay tuned for more.